It probably won't surprise you to hear that I watch and read a lot of news. A lot. Because of my job, I have to think and talk about the news a lot too. But sometimes my brain needs a break, so I put on a show that isn't exactly a critic's pick. Selling Sunset. Los Angeles, real estate, drama. Have a look at part of the trailer for season 9, which just wrapped up.
I know there's still factions and friction. If we could focus on real estate, this is our best year ever.
This is billionaire paradise.
I know, don't judge, but I know I am far from alone. Reality shows are everywhere, and a lot of people are watching, even people you may not expect. Then there are nostalgia watches, and not just for older people. Gen Zers are apparently binging shows like Gilmore Girls. So what do we get from these shows, and what's behind our addiction to escapism and nostalgia? Welcome to The Rundown. There's The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Love Island, The Real Housewives of practically every city you've ever heard of. More than 30 years after the reality TV genre really got going, it's stronger than ever. So what is it about reality TV that keeps us coming back for more? I talked to Kathy James, co-president of Proper Television and executive producer and showrunner of MasterChef Canada, among other shows, and Sarah Krischel, associate editor at The Tyee, about finding escape in reality TV when reality itself is hard to handle. Kathy, Sarah, welcome to the program. How are you guys doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
There are two types of entertainment watching that's on the rise, reality TV, and then we have nostalgia TV and films. I want to start with reality first. Kathy, what do you think people are looking for when they're watching, perhaps binging, in my case, reality TV?
I think that everybody's looking for something different. I think the way that I might watch it as a producer of unscripted television might be a little different than the way that you two watch it. So I'd like to turn it back to you two, because as the producer, it's really interesting for me to hear what you like about it.
Okay, well, Sarah, you had written an article about your Selling Sunset habit, and you wrote, more than anything, its outsized opulence drowns out the many moments when I'm uncomfortably confronted with the real-life wealth disparities all around me. I'm hoping you could take us through sort of your Selling Sunset journey, because it was sort of a love, maybe a love-love relationship, but sort of turns into a love-hate relationship. So for people who aren't familiar with Selling Sunset, what is the show? And then walk us through your journey.
Yeah, so Selling Sunset is kind of a softly scripted docu-soap series. It follows real estate agents who dress up in glamorous outfits, increasingly glamorous as the seasons go on.
Like a Tuesday is the Met Ball for them.
Oh, yes, let's be very clear. Yes.
Absolutely, and that's part of the fun, right? And yeah, they kind of they sell houses once in a while, but I think, you can't go 5 minutes without Krischel and Emma sitting on the edge of a multi-million-dollar mansion and talking about what happened at Girls Giving, which are the moments that I'm waiting for. And yeah, my journey with Selling Sunset, it truly was a journey. I remember texting friends being like, I have started the Selling Sunset journey because its popularity really exploded during the pandemic, because it first released in 2019. And yeah, I was kind of in one of two states while watching Selling Sunset. I was either, entrenched into the drama and into the psychoanalyses and into the funny, awkward moments, or, I was going through it and looking to absolutely turn my brain off. I think the moment that the fantasy sort of shattered a little bit for me was earlier this year in January, a new spin-off came out, which was Selling the City, which takes place in New York City. And I don't know, I kind of recognized, the exposed pipe and the pylons and the concrete jungle of New York City in my own city of Toronto. And I started to just feel like I was coming down to earth a little bit again. And yeah, the fantasy wasn't so much working anymore. And I kind of remembered, all the issues of housing unaffordability and the homelessness crisis and, people's inability to pay rent and buy groceries. So these people aren't that far off from us. They're around us.
Some people will talk about unscripted TV, reality shows as a form of escapism, and they may make some associations that it is, perhaps a bit lazy, some guilty pleasure watching. But these days, there's also this term of rot day. What is that?
Okay, so the rot day is basically when you are absolutely allowing yourself to be horizontal as long as you need to be, binge as many episodes guilt-free as you need to, have your favorite hot chocolate or tea or whatever it is you want, and just and kind of rest and lean into a level of rest that is considered radical these days. I think this is Gen Z's way. This trend is a reflection of our greater collective rejection against hustle culture and productivity culture, especially in a time when we're dealing with symptoms of, late stage capitalism and being exhausted from meaningless jobs and being increasingly isolated in our individual lifestyles of, working from home and perfecting our gym routine and watching our little prestige television show and then going to bed and doing it over and over again. And I think it's kind of a reflection of our lack of community and our lack of touch with a purpose and fulfillment in our generation. That's not for everybody. Rot days are beautiful and healthy and necessary. But yeah, I think it's a reflection of a greater problem sometimes.
Kathy, I want your take on this as someone, as you mentioned, who makes this television, not selling Sunset, but if we're mentioning shows, the Great Canadian Bake Show, MasterChef Canada, we've got Listing Large, which is a real estate show. So listening to what Sarah has to say, is that something that is in your brain thinking about when you're producing some of these shows?
Well, I definitely want to create an enjoyable experience. I think that, all entertainment, whether it's reading or movies, is a form of escape. In the 19th century, people were scolded for reading too much. And now, it's interesting to think of a rot day where really you're just immersing yourself in more rot, because the cycle of reality TV and digital culture and acquisitiveness and aspiration is all cycled throughout the culture. You're not escaping it when you immerse yourself in Selling Sunset. You're actually embracing it. I think that, the interesting thing about reality television, and reality is a terrible way to talk about any form of entertainment, even documentary. Nothing is real once you edit it and contracted into an hour or a 2-hour package. But I think that what's interesting about unscripted television is that it is actually can be highly authentic within a very constructed package. And when it works, even with something as contrived as Selling Sunset, where, as you mentioned, women are dressed, to go to, for a black tie party when they're going to show a house at 3 in the afternoon. I mean, it's absurd. That show is shot and lit, and the participants, even though they are real people, behaving and acting as themselves in their own lives, it is all fully produced in a way that most unscripted television isn't, because frankly, we don't have the budget for that.
Right.
But what I would say is that, reality TV works, or unscripted television works, even on Selling Sunset, because despite all the contrivance, it gets at something that people are connecting to.
I'm hoping you can pull the curtain for us a little bit. In terms of considering casting for shows that you work on, what makes a good character?
It really depends on what you're going for.
Give us an example, for sure.
Well, for the Great Canadian Baking Show, I think that for some culinary shows, because the objective of that particular show is that this is going to change your life, we want to see people sort of battle it out. We want to see, some conflict, which might actually mimic an authentic environment on the line at a high-end kitchen. We may cast for a mix of personality and cooking skill. For something like the Great Canadian Baking Show, obviously we look for people who Canadians are going to love. We look at how we represent the country as a whole, geographically, demographically, but you really, really need to be a great baker. I mean, if for that particular show, that audience wants to see people who are artists, and we spend a great deal of time, talking to them, testing them, and interviewing them to get a sense of their skill level. For something like Listing Large, which was a group of real estate agents based in I think the northern part of Toronto, it was anchored by a on-again, off-again couple that ended up coming together and getting married and having 2 kids at the end of the show. I mean, thank God for that, because that real life thing that was happening really drove the story of the show. But, it was against the background of beautiful Toronto real estate. But, they would not have had the chance to have their lives on camera if they weren't also extraordinarily good looking and very charismatic.
Right, that all plays in. I want to pick up on sort of the competition aspect of it. We see this even in dating shows. We can name a bunch of them, but what is it about sort of upping the ante that has created, or does it create a higher viewership when there is something at stake?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think, there's 2 kinds of stakes in my view, in my experience, either consuming these kinds of stories or even trying to write them sometimes. I think there's the external stakes, which is, are they gonna, in the case of Selling Sunset, are they gonna sell this $1 million mansion? Is my client who wants to sell his house for $75 million gonna be mad at me if I don't sell his house for an exorbitant amount of money? And then there's the internal stakes, there's the characters that we come to know and love. I think Chrishell has become such a fan favorite on that show, and she kind of has a perfect narrative to contribute in a space where, we see a lot of wealth, a lot of opulence. She kind of has this experience with homelessness, and it kind of aligns with a lot of viewers' values around, the American dream and getting out of a tough situation, and that it is possible to aspire to be like and look like the people who are on our screens. And it is fantasy, but it kind of does get to you on that subconscious level. So yeah, I think upping the stakes like that, both externally and emotionally, is what makes us connect to it so much, as Kathy said.
I want to turn our attention to nostalgia. From TV to vinyl records and analog technology, we are seeing this being documented. We talk about Gen Zs. As a millennial, it's a nice little pulse check to see what the kids are up to and into these days, and we know that we're what's trending. But in tough times, it seems like everyone wants to go back to what they think as a simpler time, a simpler past. And I'm just curious, what is your go-to nostalgia or escape binge, perhaps, and why?
I've got to say Gilmore Girls.
Okay,
I am that person who went to journalism school and is still obsessed with that show. I mean, I watched Gilmore Girls, Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings on, I think it was the W channel with my mom. And when the episode got a little too inappropriate for my age and for my strict parents, my mom would change the channel if my dad was in the room. But that show is just quintessential comfort. It takes place throughout the beautiful seasons in this small town, and I watch it every single fall, and it just reminds me of, watching this show with hilarious banter and iconic, flawed characters every weekend with my mom and my sister, and yeah, it just hits every time. I don't know what to say. Every single fall, it never misses.
All right. Kathy, as someone who works in TV, I don't know, maybe I'm assuming that it's something, that you're watching, but perhaps it's something else that brings back some nostalgia, but also takes you back to simpler times.
The way that nostalgia is playing out for me lately is in the kinds of shows that we are developing. And one of the shows that I'm developing right now is a dating show that takes people back in time to a university campus in which they're immersed in basically a time capsule. And I think that it really, and you know, it's interesting because it involves people like Gen Xers going back to an 80s college campus. But when I talk to younger people, they love the idea because the idea of dating and having community
Connection,
and
yeah.
meeting people in an analog world really plays into this nostalgia for a simpler time.
All right, we are going to leave it there. We will keep our eyes out for that show.
Fingers crossed.
All right, Kathy, Sarah, thank you so much. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Sometimes you just want to hang out with some old TV friends. They'll be there for you, like they've been there before, but they can also make you yearn. Nostalgia isn't only pleasurable, so why do we watch the old favorites? For the comfort, for the longing, or both? I got insights from psychologist and cognitive scientist George E. Newman, an associate professor of management and marketing at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management.
George, great to have you. How are you doing?
Great, great. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. I want you to first start off with connecting the dots for us. Nostalgia over here, escapism here. How are they connected?
Yeah, so in our work, what we find is that nostalgia provides this kind of escapism, especially when times are feeling uncertain. So if it feels like the world is a bit shaky, people are more likely to cling to nostalgia.
Tell us a little bit about the context of the study and what you wanted to look at.
Sure. So in our experiment, what we did is we brought people into a laboratory on campus, and then they came in and there's a vinyl record player, and it's a Simon Garfunkel record. And we said, okay, we want you to listen to this record and tell us how much you enjoy it, how good the experience is. But we had two different versions of the study, and in one study, before they listened to the record, they read about how, well, things seem maybe uncertain right now, but if you look at a lot of statistics, actually it's not so bad. And then in the other condition, they read, well, things seem bad now, and they really are. They're very kind of uncertain. And what we found is that in the situations in which people had read about how the current times were uncertain or unstable, they actually liked the experience of listening to the record more.
In terms of the things that we look for, vinyl records, old TV shows, which nowadays you can just pop on, any streaming service and be like, oh, the good old times. What are we looking for specifically when we are looking into the past?
Yeah, so it's really fascinating because a lot of that connection seems to be about like a communal sense of nostalgia. Maybe not something that was necessarily part of your own childhood, but things that we associate with the broader culture. And that's really what becomes attractive to us, especially in these times of uncertainty.
When you mean communal, what are we talking about? Give us an example.
So communal, it could be things like typewriters or vinyl records. And interestingly, we find that older products, let's say, from the past, like answering machines, even though they were part of the past, they don't have that same kind of sense of nostalgia.
Is it fair to say that for people who are looking at something that's nostalgic, have they necessarily lived through it themselves, or is this something that they kind of sort of resonate and connect with and be like, oh, I think that is something that, happened in the past? Or is it a direct connection to something like a typewriter or anything else?
It's a great question, and we were really surprised by this, but in our work, we actually found that it's about things that maybe weren't part of your own childhood. So like in vinyl records, the number one selling vinyl record is Taylor Swift.
Okay.
So it's suggesting that it's younger consumers, younger music listeners who probably never experienced a vinyl record, certainly as part of their own childhood, but there's something about that connection and attachment that makes it really attractive.
We hear the word retro a lot, and people are like, oh, that's so retro, that's so in. Things have made their way back. How does nostalgia drive cultural trends? You mentioned consumerism. How does that help what people view, what people buy at the end of the day?
Yeah, so what we find in these times of uncertainty and people are kind of looking back to the past, it's not just about products, it's kind of images, associations, ways of life that we think about in the past. So, ultimately it's about trying to connect to a different time period, maybe one that we think about as being more stable.
I'm going to get personal with you. Is there something for you that you kind of look back at and go like, okay, in times of, uncertainty, that you lean into the nostalgia of?
Totally. Well, when we were doing this research, part of the studies that we were doing is we were having undergraduate students listen to vinyl records in the lab. And I used to have a vinyl record collection as a kid, and it got me interested in it again, and then realized that now vinyl records are very, very expensive. yeah. But so I've done a little bit of collecting. I also really like old photographs. There's something about having the tangible photo.
So not black and white. We're talking colored, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something that's really nice about having that physical photo that, for me personally, kind of serves the same function.
There is this idea or perception that the past was simpler, more authentic. Is this a factor in sort of our reach for the past? And in some ways, is it true? I think is what most people we have this perception that those times were simpler, but are they actually true?
It's really interesting. So the research there suggests that there's a bit of rose-colored glasses when we think about the past, that we tend to filter out all of the negatives, all the difficulty. Life expectancies were shorter. It was harder to get medical care, all of those kinds of things that we don't maybe normally think of. We think about the past as this simpler, happy time. And so we might kind of gloss over some of those negative details.
Is it fair to say, though, simpler times, we were also probably in some cases younger, didn't have a lot of responsibility. So we can look back at those days and kind of go like, well, of course they were simpler. We didn't have to pay bills or a mortgage or run errands.
Yeah, there's kind of like the blurring between a communal sense of nostalgia and our own personal nostalgia. And I think you're exactly right that when we're thinking about the past, we can kind of mix those two things up and say, it was a lot simpler for me. I just had to run around and play outside, and it must have been a nice time.
What I find fascinating is people say they want to witness authenticity as well. But then we have this sort of urge to watch shows like reality TV. And I am curious, why do we binge reality TV shows that seem to sort of defy that desire of authenticity?
I think that's really fascinating too. I mean, it's authenticity in a different sense, right? That it's kind of a window into people's private lives, maybe the things that they would be a little bit ashamed of showing it. So that's part of the excitement, I think, of reality TV, is seeing that behind the scenes look. So it's a different sense of authenticity. It's maybe not authenticity with respect to our culture, but authenticity more having to do with certain kinds of people or a certain kind of lifestyle.
So you have a book out called How Great Ideas Happen, and that looks at sort of the past and how it can drive innovative ideas. Tell me, how can taking a look back through the history books do that?
So How Great Ideas Happen is definitely a big part of it is looking towards the past and being able to draw on past ideas to fuel new ones. So, a hometown success story, the Instant Pot, looking back to crock pots, which had been around for a very long time, but, taking it and reconfiguring and making something new. Or Hamilton, which just kind of smashed Broadway records, but that was really about focusing on a piece of history that maybe had been overlooked or at least not talked about quite as much, and bringing that to the fore and putting a very unique individual spin on it.
Is there a great idea that is waiting to be discovered that you think is just on the cusp of us kind of looking in the past?
I mean, throughout the book, I really try to bring up this idea that creativity and innovation is something that's available to all of us, and that there are great ideas underneath our feet. It's really just about paying attention, being responsive, looking to your environment, and in this case, also looking to the past.
What would you recommend? What is your go-to in sort of times of uncertainty, and you want to sort of to back into a time of nostalgia? What do you do?
Well, for me, as a child of the 1980s, it's all about those 1980s movies, like the John Hughes movies, is a real sense of nostalgia for me personally. Yeah.
All right, George, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love my time in the studio, but I've got to admit, it's also pretty great to shoot on location, getting to see how interesting and surprising and diverse this province is. Rundown producer Diego Garcia got this behind-the-scenes look at why filming in the field matters so much to us here. We just finished up a taping in studio. Now we're heading over to pack the van for a field shoot, heading to the EFP room, electronic field production, fancy word for cameras. Ricardo's probably in there right now, so let's go check that out. Ricardo.
Oh,
Hey,
yay.
how's it going?
Hey, pretty good. How you doing?
Are you all right? We brought a camera crew with us.
Oh.
This is Ricardo, cinematographer extraordinaire, DP, director of photography, he does everything. All right, we're going on field shoot. Tell us what we have here.
Well, we have the Canon C70, and it's a, it's a small, compact camera, and because we have to be nimble, you put on the lens, we have the sound, and we have the monitor.
We'll start at 6 a.m. Ricardo packs up the camera, extra batteries, that's always important. We're in Canada, it gets cold. Cold and batteries don't like each other so much.
I remember one time we got stuck up north, and the hotel, it was freezing. You couldn't even go to sleep.
So these are light panels, audio packs, tripods, a teleprompter.
I guess we worked together, I think the first time maybe about 8 years ago.
When I joined TVO, I was doing a lot of field work. It's taken me to places that I never thought I would go to just in Ontario. People don't realize how big Ontario is.
Did a lot of field going up to Sault Ste. Marie, to Thunder Bay.
Thunder Bay, if you've never been, a gorgeous place. And some very important stories that need to be told. Ricardo and I did a story out there about the Bear Clan.
Try to create this community that's can respond to each other.
Every day is different. I meet new people, new story.
We get to follow people. They get to show us their life, their day-to-day. There's lots of things that pop up that you don't expect. You can plan as much as you want. There you go, good.
And I think that's one of the things why I love doing field work.
Yeah.
It's different every time.
Yeah. Brampton, where are you? To be able to go and meet people where they are, that to me I think is one of the most important things in telling stories, particularly in communities that don't have news sources, newspapers. We know local news is dying, and so I think it's one thing that is super important. I love studio, but I gotta say, my heart is definitely in the field.
It's an adventure every day.
This is our last show of 2025. It's been pretty exciting, can't lie, overwhelming to start a whole new show, but we are proud of what we've done so far, and we have some big things in store for 2026, including a real studio. Let us know what else you'd like to see on the Rundown by going to tvo.org/rundownfeedback or leave us a comment on YouTube. Until then, we will see you in January. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.